Roy Moore denies any sexual misconduct, and he is not charged with any crime. The White House is officially calling tonight's speech a tax reform event. The press secretary, Sarah Sanders, says the president believes the accusations against Roy Moore are troubling, but that the people of Alabama should make the decision on whether to elect him. A former Trump campaign advisor tells the Wall Street Journal, our corporate cousin, that the president does not want to risk people seeing him alongside Roy Moore. So he'll tweet support for Roy Moore and he'll urge Alabamians to vote for Roy Moore, but he doesn't want to be standing next to Roy Moore. The advisor tells the Wall Street Journal that the Trump administration is trying to avoid the photograph. Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, is live on the North Lawn. Hello, John.
Shep, good afternoon to you. The White House disabusing us of any notion that this is a campaign event that's in any way related to the Roy Moore campaign and the election coming up on Tuesday. I'm being told by White House officials that there was nothing in the president's prepared remarks related to Roy Moore or his Democratic opponent, Doug Jones, though they also pointed out it's 25 minutes of prepared remarks. These events often go longer than an hour, so there's lots of room for the president to ad-lib in there. And all bets are off when it comes to the president ad-libbing. But listen to what the Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley said on Fox and Friends this morning.
No, it's a campaign event for Donald Trump. I mean, he's the president of the United States. He won Florida when many pundits said he couldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He has a house in Florida. And the people of Pensacola helped put Donald Trump in office. This is a thank you to them and for all the hardworking Americans out there that this president is finally giving a voice to.
All right, so that's what the White House is saying. But let's put up that map again, Shep. Pensacola, Florida, way out there on the western edge of the Panhandle, is a mere 9 miles away from the Alabama-Florida border. It's 31 miles away from the famous Florabama Border Bar, and it is 51 miles away from Mobile, and it's expected that there's going to be a lot of Bama license plates in the parking lots around the event tonight. Now, what will the president be talking about? According to the White House in his prepared remarks, he'll do kind of a year in review, priorities set and accomplished. He'll talk about tax reform. Two members of the House, by the way, last night told me they expect to have the bill on the president's desk the afternoon of December the 19th. He'll talk about the strong economy, the jobs report with 228,000 jobs added, unemployment now down at 4.1%, economic security, border security, trade, North Korea, ISIS, then on to the 2018 agenda, in which he'll talk about the need for infrastructure rebuilding, welfare reform, Veterans Affairs Administration reform, and immigration. He also plans to talk about the Democrats, again saying, as he has so many times, that they are obstructionists, also stressing the need to fund government and avoid a government shutdown at all costs, Shep. So this is going to be a lot of red meat for conservatives, many of whom will be in Alabama, just 9 miles away from where the president will be speaking. People he hopes will get out to the polls on Tuesday and vote for Roy Moore.
War Eagle.
But it's not an event about Roy Moore.
No, of course not. That's silly to even think of such a thing. There's some changes at the White House, I understand, today, John.
They're not coming for a few weeks now, Shep. Dina Powell, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategy, said that she was going to stay at the White House for a year, and she announced today through intermediaries that she will be leaving the White House probably sometime either late January or early February. Dina Powell really has been a rock star at the National Security Council. She's been involved in all the big negotiations. Anytime we're on one of the big foreign trips, she is always there. H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, recognizing her contribution in glowing terms today in a statement to the press, saying, quote, her sage advice helped provide options to the president, and her strong relationships across the U.S. government and internationally helped drive execution of the president's decisions. She is one of the most talented and effective leaders with whom I have ever served. She is moving back to New York City in February. Her family stayed there while she was commuting back and forth. She's going to continue to stay involved, though, and in a statement, Jared Kushner said she has been one of the driving forces behind trying to put together a peace deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and that she will remain involved, at least at some level, in that pursuit. And something rather unusual this afternoon in the Roosevelt Room, Shep, just as the news about Dina Powell was breaking, the president came out to swear in Kirstjen Nielsen as the new DHS secretary. You see the vice president there as well. But just as she was coming to the podium to make her statements, the White House press office shooed the press corps out of the room. So we didn't, you see there, Lindsay Walters from the press office saying, time to go. We didn't even get to hear what she had to say in response to her being sworn in and taking over the reins at DHS. I don't know exactly what the reason for that was, Shep, but I got to tell you, I have covered a lot of these swearing-ins. I was there in the Roosevelt Room, been an observer of many others, and I've never seen that before. So curious as to exactly what was behind that. Shep?
Not sure what was behind it, but the effect of it was that reporters didn't ask him questions after.
Didn't get a chance. We've got one more chance as he leaves for Pensacola late this afternoon, so we'll be out there doing our best.
All right, John. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you, too. Happy weekend.
Weekend. It's finally here. Another 50 minutes. As Roy Moore receives the full support of President Trump, one of the women accusing the candidate of sexual misconduct is talking about Tuesday's special election. Beverly Young Nelson says she was 16 and Roy Moore was in his 30s when he groped her and tried to force her to perform a sex act in his car.
It sickens me to wonder what may go on with him if he gets into office, maybe, you know. He could be doing this still. We don't know. And then again, I hope that he's changed.
As I reported, multiple women say Roy Moore sexually harassed or assaulted them, including some who say they were teenagers when it happened. But Roy Moore has repeatedly denied all of the accusations. Jonathan Seri is live in Montgomery for us this afternoon. The Moore campaign says there's no chance that he'll show tonight.
Yeah, that's right. They say he's saying in Alabama. Deputy campaign manager Hannah Ford tells Fox News, quote, Judge Moore is campaigning hard and engaging with Alabama voters. He will not be in Pensacola, but is grateful to have the president rallying conservatives near Alabama. We're actively encouraging supporters to attend the rally and look forward to victory on the 12th. Now, Moore's Democratic challenger Doug Jones is also talking optimistically about the election on the 12th. He's saying, quote, you can work together, you can cross party lines, you can reach out and you can find common ground. That's the message that he says his campaign is going to bring to Washington. He's trying to reach that common ground by rallying supporters, and he hopes some crossover Republican voters around what he calls kitchen table issues, issues of the economy, jobs, and health care. Shep.
Jonathan Seri in Montgomery, thank you. Let's turn to Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace, who's with us now from Washington ahead of his Sunday program coming up. Good to see you, Chris.
Good to be with you again, Shep.
This reporting in the Journal that the president is all in, and yet the White House doesn't want him to be seen in a photograph with Roy Moore. It was really kind of hard to have it both ways, but I guess they're giving it the effort.
Yeah, and anybody who believes that in 50 or whatever minutes the president speaks, he doesn't mention the name Roy Moore, I would like to take that action. I think that's highly unlikely he will fail to mention Roy Moore in his speech tonight, and understandably. And look, I can understand that. On the one hand, you want to support him. On the other hand, you don't want to have the picture taken with him. But if he's elected and comes to Washington, they'll have plenty of pictures together.
There are Republicans, and we've all read from them and heard from them, who are concerned about this endorsement.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, the president at one point wasn't endorsing him and saying that if the allegations were true, he should step aside. And the RNC, the Republican National Committee, pulled its support for Roy Moore. But at a certain point, the president decided, look, I'd rather have Roy Moore in there, even with all of his alleged problems, than to have a liberal and a reliable Democratic vote in Doug Jones. And so he decided that was more important, has gone in slowly but surely, has increased until it's now just an open, full-throated endorsement. And the RNC is once again pouring money into Roy Moore's campaign in Alabama.
If he wins in Alabama, which the experts seem to think he will, if he wins, what do they do in the Senate?
Nothing.
So they just seat him and don't try to remove him?
That's very interesting. Yes, there are still people who have expressed concerns about it. Not that he's in the Senate, but House Speaker Paul Ryan said yesterday, I don't care what the polls say. My opinion hasn't changed. I still don't think he should run. He should step aside. But having said that, with the president now all in, with the Republican National Committee all in, this talk that you were hearing in the early days of the allegations from people like Mitch McConnell and other senators about, you know, if he comes in, we may refuse to seat him, we may vote to expel him, it'll go to the Ethics Committee. That really has damped down. I would think that he will just, particularly with the president's support, he will be seated and he will be a senator.
There's a stark line that's been drawn now. The Democrats have come together. I think 33 senators have come together and said, you know, Al Franken has to go. Is that setting up a line of discussion, a narrative for come election time?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question that there's been, and I think some of it is conviction, but I think some of it also is political calculation by Democrats, and they moved very swiftly and fiercely this week to get rid of John Conyers, to get rid of Al Franken, and to set up a narrative that if Roy Moore were to win, then the GOP is the party of Donald Trump, who has his own allegations of sexual misconduct, and Roy Moore, and they're the party that kicks out people like Conyers and Franken. I think they see it as a good wedge political social issue for 2018. And you can be sure that they'll be saying, the Republicans are the party of social values. Well, what happens in these cases?
How much reality is there to this push to make more transparent, to make available to the public information about the $17 million in payouts that have come from the Congress? Well,
there's an effort, but, it hasn't become law yet. We're going to be talking on Sunday to Barbara Comstock, a Republican congresswoman from Virginia, as well as a Democrat, Debbie Dingell. And Comstock is pushing very hard for the House to change its rules. First of all, this incredibly arduous procedure that any woman who wants to make an accusation of sexual harassment has to go through. It's about 90 days, I think, before they can actually file a formal complaint. And then also the question of all of those people, those members of Congress who settled cases against or with women who had made allegations and did so on our dime, the taxpayers' dime. There's a push for that, but so far that hasn't gotten to the floor and there hasn't been a vote on it.
All right, Chris Wallace. Look for you this Sunday, Chris. In addition to Congresswomen Comstock and Dingell, Chris will welcome the ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. That's this Sunday on Fox News Sunday. Check your local listings on your local Fox station. 3 members of Congress have quit in 3 days. The latest, a congressman accused of asking his staffers to have his baby. Now he's explaining that request next. Plus, the day of rage against President Trump's declaration that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. It's now turned deadly. And we're there live. The Minnesota governor, Mark Dayton, says he'll announce a pick to fill Al Franken's U.S. Senate seat in the next couple of days. That's according to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune newspaper. The paper reports Dayton will likely tap his Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith. That would keep Franken's seat in Democratic hands for now. A reminder how this works. State law dictates the governor must appoint a replacement to serve until the 2018 elections. At that point, there is to be a special election. Voters are to pick someone to serve out the final 2 years of Franken's term. Then in 2020, the seat's up again, this time for a full 6-year term. Al Franken announced yesterday he's resigning after multiple women accused him of sexual harassment. Franken said that some claims are false and others he remembers differently. One of the most conservative members in all of Congress announcing today that he'll step down from his seat in the House after officials learned he asked 2 women who worked for him to be surrogates and carry his child. Republican Congressman Trent Franks of Arizona says he will resign in January after Ethics Committee officials said they investigated him for conduct that constitutes sexual harassment. In a statement, Franks explained that he and his wife struggled to get pregnant after they had twins. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We continue to have a desire to have at least one additional sibling for our children, or for which our children have made repeated requests." He went on to say, "I deeply regret that my discussion of this option and process in the workplace caused distress." A Fox urgent now, a day of rage across the Middle East. Protests turning deadly after President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Israeli soldiers using tear gas and rubber bullets against demonstrators. Palestinian officials say at least 1 man is dead and more than 200 hurt. The Israeli military confirms its soldiers opened fire on people near the border with Gaza. Some protesters locked arms to face off with Israeli police in Jerusalem's Old City today. Huge demonstrations, not only in Israel, but across the Middle East and really around the world. Thousands of people took to the streets in Egypt, where the crowd chanted, "Palestine, we never forget you. All the Arab world is supporting you." And in Baghdad, protesters burning an American flag, holding the banner that read, "Jerusalem is ours." President Trump has doubled down on his decision now. He tweeted, "I fulfilled my campaign promise. Others didn't." Both Palestinians and Israelis claim Jerusalem is their capital, and President Trump's decision to side with Israel breaks with decades of United States policy. David Lee Miller is live in Jerusalem for us this evening. David Lee?
Shepard, as of now, the death toll stands at least 2 Palestinians have been killed, and as many as 700 have been injured in clashes with Israeli troops. The Palestinians were demonstrating the president's declaration that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Now, this is the Muslim Sabbath. This was a day of prayer here. Many people were off work, but what's noteworthy is anecdotally, it appeared that there were fewer people on the streets today than there were during the last 2 days of demonstrations. The question then is, why were 2 people killed and so many people injured? Apparently, the Israeli security forces, anticipating that there would be great numbers on the street, beefed up their forces. And anecdotally today, we did see what appeared to be an increase in the amount of ammunition and the amount of tear gas that was used. But as of now, it does not look like the violence is escalating. We should know more over the next few days to see if this pattern is going to continue. One thing additionally noteworthy here, Shepard, is that today there were multiple rockets that were launched from Gaza into Israel. They landed in unpopulated areas or were intercepted, but the Israeli Air Force did respond with airstrikes. Shepard?
David Lee Miller in Jerusalem tonight. Thanks. Seems what amounts to the Facebook of Russia was looking to give a little lift to the Trump campaign before the presidential election. The reports of emails from a social media executive and what we know about the Trump campaign's response. That's coming up. Statement. He now says his resignation is effective today. Quoting from this new statement, last night my wife was admitted to the hospital in Washington, D.C. due to an ongoing ailment. After discussing options with my family, we came to the conclusion that the best thing for our family now would be for me to tender my previous resignation effective today, December the 8th, 2017. A Russian social media executive offered to help help promote President Trump's presidential campaign, easy for you to say, leading up to the 2016 election. That's according to the reporting of the Washington Post. It's reporting in today's editions that Konstantin Sidorov messaged the president's oldest son, Donald Trump Jr., and President Trump's social media manager several times, including days before the election. The tech executive apparently told the two that President Trump should create a page on Russian social network for its nearly 100 million users, writing it would be the top news in Russia. An attorney for Trump Jr. tells the Post that he forwarded the pitch to the president's social media manager, but doesn't remember if there was any further discussion about it. This comes as the president's son was on Capitol Hill this week, testifying in front of lawmakers about the Russia investigation. House and Senate investigators, along with the special counsel Robert Mueller, are looking into Russia's meddling in the 2016 presidential election and whether the Russians colluded with the members of the president's team. The White House and the Russian President Vladimir Putin have repeatedly said there was no collusion. Meantime, George Papadopoulos' fiancée says President Trump's former campaign advisor was a patriot, not a coffee boy, and that everything he did had the campaign's stamp of approval.
He was constantly in touch with the high-level official of the campaign, and he never took any initiative, as far as I know, unauthorized.
Constantly in touch, you say, with members of the campaign. Was he in touch with the chief strategist, Steve Bannon?
Yes, as far as I know, yes. I know Steve Bannon, Michael Flynn.
He was in touch with Michael Flynn, General Flynn?
Yes, as well.
That from Good Morning America. Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to lying to the feds back in October and is cooperating with Mueller's team. President Trump has downplayed Papadopoulos' role in the campaign, tweeting that he was a very low-level volunteer. Let's turn to Michael Crowley, national security and senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico. Michael, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Shep.
This communication, the words from the former girlfriend, what are we to make of all this?
Well, they're two pretty different stories, but the Russia story just keeps getting, in some ways, weirder and more complex, I suppose you could say. With the case of the Russian Facebook, it's hard to know what to make of it. I think that there are two possibilities here. One is that this is what we know, that the Russians had a sophisticated social media campaign underway that was supporting President Trump, and it played out on Twitter, it played out on Facebook. And was this somehow related to that? This big, basically the Facebook of Russia, big social media company there trying to get Trump active on their platform in Russia. And is that somehow part of this larger story? But Shep, it kind of doesn't make sense because, you know, Russian Facebook is not really going to be influencing the United States election. And so the alternative possibility here is that this Russian Facebook, basically, company is trying to glom on to the Trump phenomenon and get attention and, you know, create a web page that people are going to be excited about. I think that's just as possible. Like so many things with this Russia story, it's sort of confusing and weird and could be part of a master conspiracy and could just not really be that big a deal. By the way, remember, Trump was very popular in Russia. He was talking about better relations between the United States and Russia. So it would be natural for a Russian social media company to be interested in him for non-sinister reasons. But there is a lot of other contact from the Russians into the Trump campaign. So you have to be suspicious about it.
Do we have any clarity yet on whether there was a real push with Michael Flynn and others right there at the end, as has been described in the last few days, whether what was being said has been confirmed?
Right. So I think, Shep, you might be referring to reports that Flynn and other people in the campaign maybe were circulating stories on social media that seem to be linked to the Russians. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it's clear. I think it's clear that people in the Trump campaign were, for instance, retweeting stories that have been traced back to Russian bots or Russian trolls, as they're called, you know, on Twitter or Facebook. But what you can't really know is whether this was stuff that was popping up in, say, Kellyanne Conway's Twitter feed or her Facebook page, and it was pro-Trump and anti-Clinton, and she thought, I like that, and she circulated it to other people, or that there was some sort of coordination with the Russians. That has not at all been proved. I think there's some people who are suspicious that might have been going on. I have to tell you, at this point, I haven't seen evidence that makes me think that that was likely to be part of what was happening. Indeed, that remains speculation.
Michael Crowley from Politico, great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tragedy at a high school in New Mexico. We reported on this yesterday. A gunman killed 2 teenagers. But what we've learned about how he got into the school and his plan to commit mass murder is incredible. Plus half a dozen wildfires obliterating parts of Southern California. The forecast for when folks can expect to get some relief. That's next. Follow-up from yesterday, investigators in New Mexico say a gunman who killed 2 teenagers disguised himself as a high school student to get in the building in the first place and had planned to kill as many people as possible. This all happened yesterday at Aztec High School in the northwestern part of the state, about 3 hours north of Albuquerque. Investigators say the 21-year-old walked up and down the hallways, firing at random and into classrooms. The police say the shooter then killed himself. The feds say they briefly investigated this man back in the year 2016 after he wrote about mass shootings on an online gaming message board. Our chief correspondent Jonathan Hunt has been looking into his background. He's live on the West Coast in our news hub there. What do we know about the victims?
Well, Shep, they were apparently both very promising students. Francisco Fernandez, for instance, was a football player, a born competitor, according to his family. Casey Marquez, the other victim, was a cheerleading captain, selected to cheer at the Orange Bowl. And as you look at this terrifying video from inside the school as the shooting was happening, we should tell you that both victims were, according to police, shot at random, not targeted. They simply happened to cross paths with the shooter as he roamed the school. New Mexico's governor met with the families of both students.
They seem to be just absolutely broken. I cannot imagine anyone being told that when you send your child to a school that they die in that school because some evil human being took their lives.
Now, the governor and other officials say the gunman intended to kill many more, but the quick actions of school staff following lockdown procedures and the police arriving within a minute of the first call saved potentially a lot of lives, Shep.
What more have you learned about his plans, the shooter's plans?
Well, for instance, we know he absolutely intended to die. Police revealing that they found a note in a trash can at his home. It read, 1 to 6:20, work. 6:20 to 7, pack up. 7 to 7:30, prep. 7:30 to 8, walk. 8, die.
This person, not only a coward, he's evil.